Nothing says summer in Vermont like a lazy day at your favorite swimming hole. So how do we protect these incredible resources and Vermont's network of waterways for future generations? We're learning from an expert today on Across the Fence. Hello, Vermont. No matter what part of the state you live in, when I say that in Vermont, our way of life is deeply connected to the land, that probably rings true. But have you ever thought about how dependent our land is on Vermont's rivers? And by extension, how critical rivers are to our communities and way of life? My guest today spends a lot of time thinking about just that. Joining me today is Kassia Randzio, the Executive Director of the Vermont River Conservancy, which launched 30 years ago when a group of volunteers came together to protect access to a swimming hole on the Dog River. Kassia Randzio, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
It's lovely to have you here. Well, let's start with swimming holes. One, because I was just at one, but also that's kind of where the Conservancy began. So talk to us a little bit about what you've been doing there.
Yeah, so our work really began in the mid-1990s, and I think for so many Vermonters, swimming holes are just part of a quintessential Vermont summer experience. Yeah. It's right up there with creamies on what it means to have summer in Vermont.
So you can combine the two, you're having a perfect day.
That's a perfect day.
Yeah.
And in the mid-90s, land started to transfer and change hands a little bit more frequently. And so there were communities across Vermont where there's not a swimming pool in every little rural town, but what you have is almost every town, every community has a swimming hole. Yeah. And so as land was changing hands, people were putting up no trespassing signs. And communities were coming together and saying, that's not okay, that's our place, that feels like a public place.
Yeah, it's like a public beach.
It's like a public beach.
Yeah.
And these are places where kids spend entire summers. They attract generations, so it's grandma and grandpa and the kids and everybody in between out with a picnic. And there was this fear that we were going to lose access as a state, communities, to this really public asset. And so our organization came together to help protect these places by buying the land, doing conservation easements, and making sure that people would always have this amazing experience.
Yeah, and it's even a little bit beyond swimming holes, right, too, because it's fishing access points.
Exactly.
And it's places where you can put a boat into the water, like your kayak or something like that, too. So one of the things I know that you do on your very phenomenal website, which people should definitely spend some time on, is you've got this great little section, Find Your River. So you're helping people connect to their next adventure too.
That's right. And so since over the last 30 years, our work has not just been swimming holes in terms of recreation, but places to cast a line, places to launch a canoe, a kayak, and now more and more, of course, stand-up paddle boards. And so on our website, there's a spot at the top called Find Your River. You click on that, you can go to an interactive map, and you can filter by your favorite activity. You can check out different places, and it's a wonderful way to find a place you haven't been to before and maybe add someplace new to your summer bucket list.
Yeah, make your summer even better.
That's right.
Well, one of the ways actually that I, in part, got on my radar was because you have a phenomenal Instagram account also, which does a lot of posting about things like swimming holes, but not just swimming holes, also things like how to be safe at swimming holes and rivers. And this summer we've had a few tragedies. So what are some tips that people need to know about also being safe around rivers and swimming holes?
I'm really glad you asked that question because that's so important. We go to these places to have fun, and a fun day needs to be a safe day too. Yeah. And so that really starts before you even get to the swimming hole. So there are the things that you may be obvious, like packing your sunscreen, your hat.
Right.
We recommend.
I love that you got the sunscreen in there. Yes. Okay. Right.
We recommend the closed-toed shoes because there are rocks and sticks, and just to protect your feet for whatever's out there. And then life jackets. And I know people think of life jackets as something you would bring on a boat.
Right.
And swimming holes also are an amazing place for a life jacket. They help kids float. I prefer to swim in a life jacket because it's cozy. And you never know when conditions are going to change and keep kids safe out there. And, you know,
And some of our swimming holes can be a little unpredictable.
Exactly.
Especially when we've had weather.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And what's happening more and more with climate change is that there are more small storms that may not even be where you are. So you may not feel a drop of rain where you are, but up the mountain, up above you, there's been a small thunderstorm, and that water comes right down, and it can really change the currents really quickly.
Yeah.
And so if you're out with kids, making sure you have what we call a water watcher, which is somebody who's 16 years or older, prepared to help out and actively watching kids.
Actively, that being the operative
That's the
word.
tricky part. I'm a mom. It's very tempting to just sit and read your book and have a nice time.
Yeah.
But the active watching is really important because unlike a pool where there might be lifeguards, there's not lifeguards out in nature.
Yeah.
And
We
you
have
just
to be the
never know when
lifeguards.
conditions are going to change.
Yeah. Well, and let's stay there too, because you were talking about climate change and you know, the impact of climate change on rivers, and that gets into the wider mission of the Conservancy.
Absolutely.
So let's take that like 20,000 foot perspective and talk about what is happening with rivers in Vermont and what we're seeing, like what are the impacts of climate change on our river systems?
Yeah, so the way that climate change is really felt in Vermont comes back to our rivers in so many ways. So we're seeing more precipitation. We're seeing more rain on snow in the winter. We're seeing more drought. All three of those things mean more flooding. Even drought means more flooding. And so that's really felt by our rivers and absorbed by our rivers and felt by our communities. And as we've seen each of the last several years, what it means is friends and neighbors, whole communities with schools shut down, roads closed, water in kitchens, all of those, really that trauma. Yet we know, like where we started, rivers are also an asset in our communities. So it's a tricky balance there.
Yeah, and many of our communities are actually integrated kind of in proximity to rivers and things as well.
Absolutely.
You just think about the traditional way of getting around, transportation even. I mean, our villages grew up around these rivers. So what does conservation work look like for helping protect rivers? And like what, you know, like do we even know what a river looks like? California, we don't know what rivers look like anymore because all of our rivers are essentially running through concrete channels.
Yeah.
What is a river intended to be like, and how does that go along with the River Conservancy's work?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we think of
I realized I was doing this with my hands. I'm trying to tell you what a river looks like right there.
Vermont, we think of our rivers as being really natural. They have trees along them. The reality is that 75% of our rivers, the length of the rivers, have been straightened over time.
75%.
Which is really surprising. And that has a lot to do with our land history. So when in the late 1800s, early 1900s, all of Vermont was essentially clear cut. And when that happened, there were roads, railroads, and we were moving logs. And so we were literally dynamiting stretches of rivers. When settlers came, one of the easiest places to build is right along the floodplain. A floodplain is part of the river. So the rivers that we see,
intended for overflow.
It's intended for overflow. And for millennia, our rivers have overflowed across the land. And when we've built up in those places, we've literally been building in the riverbed. And so once one flood happens, the kind of reaction is to build up the riverbank, and it straightens the rivers. It makes everything faster and really more harmful because the rivers are more powerful.
Yeah. So talk then about these easements that the Conservancy is doing with farmers and what that impact has on the landscape.
So as a land trust, the bulk of our work is protecting land through conservation easements, and a lot of those easements are with farmers. We hold over 100 easements across the state, and oftentimes we can see this during floods, and I know farmers feel it, that when floods happen, oftentimes farms are the first to flood because it's the open land, and farms are there because of the floods. The soil is rich
It riches,
because of the floods for eons. And when the land is flooding, it of course ruins crops, those types of impacts to farmers. What we do is work with farmers and compensate farmers up front and say, you know what, like, keep owning your land, keep farming your land. This is really important, but you're going to allow 50 feet or more of the land between your crops and the river to grow up as trees, as shrubs, and have that natural buffer between the farm and the river.
Yeah.
And what that does is the roots hold the soil in place. So the farmers, it's actually really great for preventing erosion.
Yeah.
And when the next flood comes, it acts as a sieve. And farmers agree to allow the water to flow over the land and do all of us this community service and benefit, which is why they're compensated at the outset.
I love that the Conservancy has this sort of like macro to micro view of community and how community interacts with water, because it's all the way from that larger picture perspective of how rivers are flowing through our landscape and how do we work with like our large agricultural communities and like keep our agricultural identity, but then all the way also down to the personal use and how it gets into communities when you can all rally around a swimming hole too.
That's right.
And keep that relationship. So this is important work. How can people help?
Yeah, so I think one of the most important things, first and foremost, is pay attention. So find a river in your community and follow that river, figure out where the water comes from, figure out where that water goes, what's happening along that river, and just get to know your local river. And when you do that, you're going to be paying attention to your place and the broader rivers in a really different way. And anybody can do that right with it where they are.
Yeah.
Number two is to volunteer and get involved. And so if you go to our website, there's a link right at the top that says volunteer. And we have opportunities each spring. We plant over 1,000 trees along our rivers. We're out helping to build trails along rivers. So there are a lot of ways to get involved. And not only with us, but a lot of the different watersheds all over the state have a local watershed group. And that is a really wonderful community to be part of. And then third, I would say, is to donate. And so I know that people get asked to donate all the time, and people can think, what difference would it make if I give $10 or $50? But even just knowing like your listenership and your viewers right now, if 1 in 10 people were to give $10 a month, we could actually do twice as much work every year.
That is amazing.
And that's the difference of $10.
That's the difference of $10. So you have a lot you can do here. So if you want to know more about the Vermont River Conservancy and its mission to protect floodplains, wetlands, and forests, restore resilient communities, and connect people to rivers, check out their website. The link is right there on your screen. You'll find a tab there to help you find your river too, as well as more information about how to get involved. Kassia Randzio, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
It's been lovely. And as always, thank you, Vermont, for learning and exploring with me today. And thanks to the team that makes Across the Fence possible. I'm Amy Finley. This is Across the Fence. Come back and let's learn and explore again tomorrow.